Yeah, we used to come to Windsor and go to Detroit for shows. Like when I was like a little bit older, like by the time I was like 18, 19.
Yeah.
For like Hard Time and like that kind of stuff was happening. But we would go to like Detroit to go to like the Shelter and like to like Mr. Muggs and like that kind of stuff, like in Ypsilanti. Yeah. Like to go see like Walls of Jericho and like bands like that. Yeah. So that was sort of like, oh, okay. But
it's funny because growing up here, that's not a trip. That's
you're just like going through the tunnel.
But that's got to be like a fucking adventure for you guys, right?
Yeah, and we didn't do it like I say like we did it. Like we would more because tons of shows happen in London, Ontario because of Call the Office. Yeah. So I would go to London, Ontario, or I would go to Guelph. And that's actually how I met Jay, who plays in Bats. He's from London. Right. So we've known each other since like late 90s.
Just showing up to hardcore shows.
Just going to hardcore shows. And because there was only, like 30 of us, you just kind of became friends. And then the London scene and the Waterloo scene became very close. Okay. Because we were like...
London's got a killer music scene.
And it was like... We'll come for your hardcore shows. Do you know what I mean? So it was sort of like spoken, unspoken. Like if you guys put on a show, like if For Dire Life's Sake is going to come and play, or like someone cool, we'll all come down to make sure that show does well. Right. So it's like no one loses any money. The show will be cool, and then vice versa. They were like, oh, if there's something happening in Waterloo, or like if the Swarm is playing Waterloo, like we'll come to that show.
It's great though.
It was awesome, and it was why we became like such good friends. Like with tons of people in that city.
When did music start being? Because like I know just from sort of understanding skateboard culture, like punk rock is immediately attached to it. Like as soon as you get to a skateboard, punk rock's there. When did it become more of a thing more than a thing you listened to, and started to become a thing you wanted to do?
I always like played music though at the same time. Yeah. Okay. So I like played drums since I was 15, 16 was when I got my first kit. But always wanted to play drums, just like didn't have the money. Right. And was just like, oh, this is sick. I'll like play drums. Right. But would spend my money on skateboarding and snowboarding, especially snowboarding. I was like really into snowboarding, right? And was like, I'm better at this than skateboarding, so
it was a focus.
Yeah, and then I got a job at a snowboard shop, so it was like, okay, I could actually like see a career.
See, that's funny because before we got started the podcast, we were talking, and we'll get to this part of your story, but you were talking about dealing with the record label that you deal with. What's the name of it?
New Damage.
New Damage. And how you sort of like would just show up and go and sort of ask the questions or whatever. That was that's a thing you've always done, huh?
Oh, like that's the thing that I realized was like getting that job when I was 16. Yeah. Was like such a huge like pivotal point. And, like, so many of the things that I learned that I now... Like, I run a clothing brand now. Okay. I, like, basically sell gear is, like, what we do for Cancer Bats. Right. It's, like, running a small business. So it was, like, learning all of these things when I was, like, 16. But at the time, I just was like, oh, yeah, I'm just selling snowboards. And then I learned how to sell skis and cross-country skis. They sold, like, camping gear and rollerblades. Like, they kind of sold everything. Right. So I just was, like, learning all this, like, small business, like, stuff. And I worked for that shop and for other skate shops until I was, like, 21.
Yeah, but there was... If you were there that long, then in your run there was, what, 12, 15 other fucking kids that came into the same shop and didn't end up paying attention to the shit that you paid attention to?
Yes, but it's funny because there was a lot of people at that shop specifically. It was called OW Sports. Okay. There was a lot of people who like ended up doing like other things. There was a guy in Waterloo who was like he ended up promoting like all these like more specifically like Christian bands, but he became like a big like promoter, like DIY promoter in Waterloo. Yeah. And like we worked together. There was another guy who went on to like actually work in I think the ski industry. But yeah, it was like it was just because like they taught us a lot of like really good stuff.
So you had really good mentors there.
Yeah, but in a weird, I would say exactly. And at the time, you don't think
without it being forced on you, they just made you immerse.
Yeah, they were just like, we want you to be able to sell tons of stuff and make us lots of money.
That's awesome.